Every day, our phones and computers are flooded with a massive amount of new information. Whether through Instagram, X, or serious news portals, we only need to look through a few seconds to think we know everything, and then we easily scroll away. But can these fragments of information really allow people to see the story? In other words, who will be moved by these fragmented news stories? If news stories lose their ability to invoke empathy, are they merely statements of facts? Are we walking in a barren desert of narrative? This phenomenon has been described by German philosopher Byung-Chul Han as the disenchantment of the world. In the crisis of narration, it follows. Narrating requires leisure. On the conditions of accelerated communication, we do not have the time or even the patience to tell stories. We merely exchange information. You can imagine the world of news as a valley. In the past, when information was not yet presented in an explosion of data, people walked through it and always gained insights. However, the overload of transparent information is like an overly dense and noisy forest, where the charm of narrative space is gone and people are lost in a looping information maze. Most of the news we see today is just a series of brief shocks and fragmented data. These news stories go into great detail from the headline onwards, trying to tell readers every little thing, but they don't say anything about the imagination behind the events. Even if we know the color of the victim's socks, the important stuff slips through our fingers like sand.
In northern Gaza is burning. Moments before, a member of staff managed to deliver this message.
جيش الاحتلال الآن يحاصر مستشفى كمال عدوان ويطلب من الدكتور حسام وصفية إنزال المرضى.
The tragedy in Gaza has been seen by the whole world, but our understanding of Gaza seems to be limited to the fact that a war is taking place there. Take the Gaza hospital bombing as an example. What we see in the news are only the number of casualties and images of building debris. But what happens next? What were the names of the injured? What were their lives like before? And where will they go now? These stories beyond the data are almost impossible to see. Sontag called it compassion fatigue. The more we see suffering, the harder it is to feel it. Fragmented information tells us what happened, but it doesn't tell us why it matters. It turns news into shareable material and a container for shock stimulation, but it's hard to become a story worth telling. In Sydney, I recorded a march for Palestine at the end of June. The footage showed people shouting and waving flags, creating a visually striking scene. However, when I reviewed the footage, I realized something. Without narration, context, or insights into their stories, these scenes were just another set of fragments. People called out slogans as they passed in front of the camera, but their deeper voices were not conveyed. We know they are protesting, but we don't know why they are fighting, for their loved ones, for justice, or simply because they have been manipulated by capitals. Han reminds us that a transparent world loses the charm of layers and depth. When faced with events, people prefer shock over favor. The march became completely visible actions as journalists followed it, but the emotions and the meaning behind it were lost in the excessive visibility. Benjamin once warned that modern news is obsessed with the present moment rather than lasting meaning. Perhaps we can never stop the flood of information, but we can choose how to tell the story. We can try to slow down and focus on a person, a gaze, a pair of hands, instead of being led by what algorithm push at you. We can create silence in the frame, allowing the audience to feel the weight of the moment, rather than filling every second with facts. News is not just about reporting what happened. It should also respond to what does this mean for us. Perhaps this is precisely how we can rebuild narrative tension in a world that is overly transparent. Thank you for your watching.